Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Let's Talk About Work on LinkedIn Live. We'll get started in just a minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Let's Talk About Work. And if I seem overly giddy tonight, it's because I absolutely am. Because if you ever had one of those moments where you follow somebody like your whole career, you read their work, and then you write a book like based on their thought leadership. So that happened in real life. I I read a book, Radical Candor, years ago. I mean, it really intrigued me as being an HR professional and then leadership development expert about how important candor is in the workplace. So when I wrote my next book, The Power of One, Leading with Civility, Candor, and Courage, Kim Scott, I had to quote many times because she is just the expert. And when I reached out to her just to let her know, oh, hey, I mentioned you in my book. I don't know if you care or not. She cared.
Of course I cared.
She cared. And I just felt so seen and heard at that moment. So anyway, so after having a lot of conversation back and forth with her, she's absolutely phenomenal. My heart overfloweth, and she introduced me to a CEO. So she has new work, and we're going to talk about that in a minute because it's just as important. But she introduced me electronically to her CEO of Just Work, Bryant, and I'm reading her bio, and I'm like, wait a minute, and then they agreed to be on the show. So now I have, starting ironically, this Women's History Month, two phenomenal women on Let's Talk About Work. Welcome, Kim.
Natasha, I would say three phenomenal women.
Three. Yes, I was going to say the same thing.
Thank you so much, Kim Trier. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know you have a super busy schedule, so I just want to thank you in advance for gracing me and my followers with your expertise and your presence. And I can't wait just to dive into, this. I mean, talk about reading in one night. And it was like I was at a church service. And I'm like, amen. Oh my goodness, amen. Tell it. I mean, I'm just like, this is it. And so much good stuff. But before we do that, just in case, for some reason, people don't know who you are, why don't you just kind of briefly introduce yourselves and give your background, and we will start with you, Trier.
Okay. First and foremost, the most important thing is I'm a Beyonce fan. That is what you need to know about me. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, the queen, right? No, I am the CEO.
Stop you there for just a minute because it's so ironic. I tell my kids all the time and my husband, when that time comes for me to, leave this earth, I want a Beyonce themed funeral. That's how much of a Beyonce. So, sorry. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I see you, Natasha, and I feel seen. So I am Trier Bryant. I am the co-founder and CEO of Just Work. And Just Work is not only the company, the book, and the framework. And we work with organizations and leaders to help create more inclusive and equitable workplaces. Because we truly believe that, if we can take care of our people and optimize for their talent, then they will take care of the rest. But there's so many opportunities where we can do better with that. And that comes from, rooting out workplace injustice, which we define as bias, prejudice, bullying, which is what the book goes into detail. But then also just more broadly, right, the inclusion strategy equity, diversity for an organization and what that truly means, because we definitely need to get past talking about it, but like putting it into action. And so I have spent my 15 plus year career doing that across multiple industries, starting from the military. I served active duty in the Air Force, 7 years as a combat veteran, then transitioning to Wall Street at Goldman Sachs, and then pivoting into tech, where I've been at companies like Twitter, SigFig, Astra, and having the opportunity and the privilege to work with a lot of tech companies and help them get to where they want to go.
Wonderful. Oh, what a tremendous, diverse background. I mean, talk about killing it. And when I read your bio, I'm like, first of all, why have I not known her before now? That was my first question. Something in the stars definitely did not align, right? But you know what? I know you now thanks to our next guest, Kim Scott.
Thank you so much. Well, it's an honor to be here with you, Natasha, and I love your book and am so excited for it to come out. So I did a bunch of failed startups, and then I joined Google, and that worked out a lot better. And then I sort of realized at one point that the thing that I really cared about was not cost per click, although that was going okay at Google, but rather what does it take to build a kind of environment where people can love their work and at least enjoy working together, and ideally actually love one another. And that there wasn't a job. That wasn't a job at Google. But to my great surprise, I found out that it was a job at Apple. So Steve Jobs had decided that to throw away all the management training that they had and to start from a blank piece of paper. And so I got invited to help them do that. I was teaching a class called Managing at Apple, Designing and Teaching. And then Dick Costello, who Trier and I both worked with, reached out to me when he became CEO of Twitter. And he said, why don't you help me design Managing at Twitter? And lo and behold, Managing at Twitter looked pretty much exactly like Managing at Apple. And I realized it's really the same, not just in tech, but in any time you have a group of people collaborating to get stuff done. It's the same basic management principles. And that was sort of how I began my CEO coaching experience while I was writing Radical Candor. Mm-hmm. And then as Radical Candor came out, I had a good friend of mine tell me, it's much easier. She was the CEO of a tech company in San Francisco and one of too few Black women CEOs in tech. And she pulled me aside after I gave a presentation at her company. And she said, I got to tell you, Kim, it's much easier for you to roll out Radical Candor than it is for me. And she explained to me that as soon as she offered anyone, even the most gentle, compassionate criticism, she would get slimed with the angry Black woman stereotype. Mm-hmm. And I knew this was true. And at that moment, I realized that I had failed on a bunch of different levels. I had failed to be the kind of colleague I wanted to be for her. I had failed to be an upstander. I had failed to be, and I did that in part because I never want to think of myself as as a person who doesn't stand up for people. But I had also failed to recognize the things that happened to me. I had failed to recognize when I had been a victim of this kind of workplace injustice. Mm-hmm. And in part because I'm uncomfortable thinking of myself as a victim. I think our society treats victims very strangely. But even less than wanting to think of myself as a victim did I ever want to think of myself as a perpetrator. But as soon as she said that to me, I could think of a bunch of times when I had caused harm in the workplace. And last but not least, I had not been the kind of leader I wanted to be. I had failed to create the whole reason I cared about management was I wanted to create these great environments, and I had often failed to do so. So that's kind of the moment when Just Work was born. And then I was lucky enough to meet Trier as I was finishing. I wish I had met Trier. I wish I had met you earlier. We could have written it together, but we're starting the company together.
Right. So how did that happen? How did you meet each other? I'm removing you guys from my vocabulary. It's taken me a while. It's something I say on a daily basis for 40 plus years. Yeah. So, but I do acknowledge every time I mess up. So please blame it on my mind, not my heart. So how did the two of you meet and form?
We were introduced by a mutual friend, colleague in this industry that we're in. And it was funny because Kim was like, I'm looking for a co-founder. I want to start a company to put this book into practice. And at the time, I was the chief people officer at a space company. We were launching rockets in the middle of COVID. Over 80% of our employees had to physically touch the rocket to get the job done. And we worked on site through COVID because our clients were like the Department of Defense and the Air Force. And they wrote us this document that said, hey, yeah, COVID's going on, but like, go back to work. Mm-hmm. So we did. So I was like, Kim, I don't have time to start a company. I'm just trying to like keep my employees safe. Like, it was just a really tough time, Natasha, I think, as a lot of people leaders. Mm-hmm. And then also with everything going on with the demonstrations with Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And I read the book and I called Kim back and I was like, this is very powerful and this is different, because for me, I feel like in this space, when we're talking about inclusion and equity and diversity, we keep talking about it. We have named the problem in so many different ways, but in this also special moment, people actually want to do something differently. They want to be better, but they don't know what to do. So what do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you say when you don't know what to say? And we need to get tactical, and we need to get tactical at every level, regardless if you are, the most junior individual contributor all the way up to the CEO. And so the Just Work framework is practical and tactical, and really takes into account all the roles that you can play, from the person who's being harmed, the person who's causing harm, the upstander who's a bystander who intervenes, and we want to empower everyone to intervene, and then a leader whose responsibility it is to prevent these things from occurring. So it's very thoughtful, it's intentional, but it's tactical and practical, so that we can come in and do a 60-minute keynote, and then we have so many testimonials and feedback that are like, hey, Kim and Trier, I went to my next meeting and we immediately started throwing purple flags, right?
Wow.
So
yep.
It is, and that is what we need. So there's parts of the book that are go deeper for leaders and that take a little bit more change management, which is necessary and thoughtful. But then there's also things that, again, you can immediately start to put into practice and notice a difference.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I got from it. And, I'm all about, my power of one that you've had the honor, Kim, of having a pre-read. It's about ordinary actions that influence extraordinary change. And I think just as Trier, explained, it's a whole lot of talk that was going on, especially in the past 2 years. But I've gotten that feedback too of, well, I don't know what to do. Like, I get it. I want to be an ally. I want to be, we're going to talk about this word upstander, because I was like, oh, how did they coin that? But, I want to be an upstander, but I don't know how to do it. And people are wanting in organizations, both leaders, individual contributors, those actionable ways to really transform culture. And I think we all three agree that we've waited too long for people in positional power to do that. We've waited too long for strategies and accountability, all of that. And while you give leaders and organizations a framework, it's also about equipping those individual contributors with actions to just transform culture on your own. You don't need to wait for a big strategy to do it. So let's talk about upstanders, Kim. I mean, I was like, in fact, how did you coin that? Because I've done bystander intervention training, but I like the upstander word a lot better than bystander, because bystander seems passive, right?
Yeah, it seems like you're standing by. Yeah, and there's also a lot of research that I was reading as I was writing the book. I read a bunch of different books, and there's a lot of research about the silent bystander. And I felt that I had been too often in my career silent, either a silent bystander to things that had happened to me and things that had happened to other people. And I think I took the term upstander from someone else, and I'm ashamed to say I don't even remember it. I didn't make it up. It's I read it in several different places.
Okay.
But the idea is that you have an obligation to intervene, to say something if you notice something happening that is not right. And I think if it's happening to you, you get to choose a response. But I want choosing a response to be sort of a proactive measure. But if you notice something happening to someone else, it's so important to stand up, not for that person as though you're stronger than that person. I think one of the risks of upstander is it can be sort of casting the other person as damsel in distress and yourself as
I'm a hero and coming.
Yeah. Or it can be white savior complex.
White savior,
yeah. So it's not like you're standing up for that person, but you're standing up to the injustice. You're speaking, you're intervening in some way. So that's my thought. Tria, I know you have a bunch of thoughts on this as well.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I just think it's important to have the concept and for people to understand that there are different roles and to give folks, you know, an opportunity to really put things in their toolkit, in their toolbox. So when they find themselves in that situation, if you are the person being harmed, you know, you can choose a response, but, you know, you can also delegate, you can come back to it, you can wait. I think that we've all been in that situation where it's exhausting. And you're just like, oh, I have to help someone understand this again. And that's where I think the concept of being an upstander is so important, because, you know, it really shifts that responsibility to say, hey, it's all of us and not just the person who's being harmed in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I love you said that, all of us. I coined a concept late last year. I've been doing a lot of training. It's called allyship, and it's from allyship to ourship. And you probably read about that in the book as well, because again, it's about moving forward together. You know, this is our problem. This is not like you just described. It's like we were writing in tandem, like at the same time, same thoughts, but it's you know, it's not, it's your problem, and you know, I can come help you and then retreat into my privilege, right? What ourship is very similar to what you described as, you know, giving away your power and privilege and digging deep into, you know, and moving up together, you know, to create more inclusive workplaces. And you give lots of examples in your book of, you don't coin it as ourship, but you give a lot of examples of what I would see as a concept of ourship. And we have even a comment here. I really like upstander too, much better than ally, which is used as a label regardless of actions and reactions in a specific situation that requires an interruption into what is happening. Thank you, Shelley. That's very, very well. So, Trier, the 6 problems, your workflow, I like that it was really broken down. And I know you wrote about it, Kim, and you know, together going to organizations. And in your opinion, when it comes to workplace injustice, there are 6 different problems: bias, prejudice, bullying, discrimination, verbal harassment, and physical violations. And I was trying to think, like, okay, is there more I can add to that? I'm like, no, that pretty much explains it all.
Yeah, it really does. And that's why we talk about the root causes of workplace injustice, which you said the first 3 we name as bias, and then prejudice, bullying. And the simple definitions that we use is that bias is not meaning it, prejudice is meaning it, and then bullying is causing harm, is meaning to cause harm, and you know, with the intent to cause harm. So it's interesting that when you just put it in that framing, and then what gives you the other 3 is that when you introduce power, because we have to acknowledge the power dynamic that happens in the workplace and what happens. So when you have bias and bullying plus power, when you get bias and prejudice plus power, that's where it creates the conditions for discrimination. Bullying plus power creates the conditions for harassment, and then touch plus power creates the conditions for physical violations, right? And to your point, like, you know, is there anything else? But those are the root causes. It can show up and manifest in different ways, and we experience it in different ways, but most often we can name it in one of those 3 of the root causes, or thinking about how power is introduced into the equation. But what's so interesting, Natasha, is that if you would have asked me before, you know, I met Kim and read this book, like, Trier, have you ever been bullied in your career? I'd be like, no, girl, like, look at me. Have you met me? Like, I've never been bullied. You come for me, I'm gonna come for you, right? Like, no. And then you read this book and Kim is like, oh, bullying is being mean with the intent to cause harm. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have been bullied so much in my career. Like, let's just take out basic training, right? But like, I have been bullied so much in my career. But the thing is that because I couldn't name it in that way, that means I
Mhm.
didn't solve for it. That means I never stood up for myself. I never acknowledged it. I never held anyone accountable because I didn't name it in that way. And so, what I think is also really powerful about this framework is that when we go into organizations and we bring this framework into organizations and we help employees be able to name what they're experiencing, that means that leaders then can actually solve it, right? When you can name it, you can solve it. And so, when you have folks that can come and articulate, hey, this is prejudice. Someone said that, women shouldn't be leaders and they don't want to be on my team. That's a prejudice and they mean
Mhm.
that. What can we do? What do we have in place to like overcome that? And
That's
so I
right.
think it's really powerful and leaders appreciate, because oftentimes like it's really hard, like, oh, that was uncomfortable. I don't know what it is. But when you give people this shared language and then a shared norm that goes with it, again, that immediately empowers people to talk about it, name it, and then it gives leaders an
Right.
opportunity to change it and, prevent it from happening in the future.
I love it. I love it. Kim, we only have a few minutes. I got a few minutes left, but I want to bring up a very sensitive topic.
Okay.
As you know, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm, on there all day, every day, I feel like. But I hear a lot of people saying that white women should not be doing DEI work. And when I read your book, and I've never agreed with that because, first of all, I believe that there's many levels of dimensions of diversity, right? So if you should really, it should be maybe you should reframe it as white women should not be talking about the Black experience, right? But when I think about DEI work, which is really what this book is, it's creating inclusive environments for a diverse group of people. But when I read your stories, right, and I think that that's what we need to hear more of, because first of all, you share stories of your own experiences, just like you talked about in your intro of these 6 things that happen, maybe not all of them, but you've had experiences with these 6 things that create injustices in the workplace. And you've also confronted yourself as a leader to say that I may have contributed to inequities or unequitable or a non-inclusive environment. And I think we need more of that from non-marginalized people, to talk about it, give perspectives, and to maybe share in a point of view where maybe you don't understand it from my perspective as a Black woman or a disabled person or whatever it is, but I can understand it better from a white person. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would love to get your thoughts on whether I got the balance right, because it was something I really struggled with as I wrote the book. There was part of me that felt like, do I even have the right to write this book at
Mhm.
this moment in time? And that was something I really struggled with. And what I decided was one of the things from a position of privilege, having played so often both the role of being on the receiving end of workplace injustices, but also, unfortunately, sometimes creating workplace injustices. It was it was it was probably safer for me than for a white man to admit that I had done these things against women in the workplace.
Mhm.
And it was also, I think, I tried anyway to write stories about things that had happened to me in a way that built solidarity to things that had happened with things that had happened to other people. So I tried very hard not to say I have all the answers. Like I said, here's what happened to me, here's what worked for me,
Mhm.
or here's what didn't work for me, here's what I wish I
Mhm.
had done. I have gotten some feedback on the book that I pushed people maybe harder than I should have to get them to speak out,
Mhm.
because it's not always safe, and it's obviously much safer for me to speak out than it is for people.
Mhm.
I have kind of one intersection. I'm
Right.
privileged along many dimensions, being white and educational background and being American, and kind of the only dimension along which I'm underrepresented ever is being a woman.
Right.
So, but I would love to hear your all's thoughts. I'm wide
Yeah.
open because I'm not sure I got it right.
Priya?
So, Natasha, I have strong points of view on this. But one,
Okay,
first,
please.
I wanna acknowledge something that Kim did, right? And something that we've actually heard from folks that we've worked with is that Kim did not go into writing the book saying, I'm a DE&I practitioner and here is a DE&I framework, right? Kim went and said, these are my experiences, these are my observations, and I have a point of view. And Kim always says, She feels all problems in the world can be solved with a good 2x2. That's right. That's her MBA, her HBS MBA coming out, right? And so, but she was so thoughtful and intentional saying, but I want a CEO that's going to help organizations put this into practice that is a practitioner. And so Kim oftentimes explains like, hey, I've had a lot of root canals and I have a point of view on like how to not make it hurt so bad and why I shouldn't have root canals, but I need to work with a dentist, right? A dentist who is a professional. And so Kim had no intention of saying like, hey, I'm this DE&I practitioner, right? I have been doing this work. I'm a DE&I practitioner. So that I want to like, I appreciated Kim saying, and there's a lot of things like when Kim says, I wish I would have met you when I read the book, because there's a lot of things like, Kim, I know you meant the best intent, but like if an organization said, we're going to do this, I would be like, whew, let's slow down, right? Because there's a certain way in the change management of how we do it, right? And we laugh and joke about these things when we're working with a lot of our clients. However, to answer your question on like, well, should white women should not be doing D&I work? Let me tell you who should not be doing D&I work. Those who do not have the expertise. I don't care what you look like, but what we are doing is that we are creating more issues by saying, oh, you're a woman? Oh, you understand inclusion, diversity. Oh, you're Hispanic, Latina. Oh, you should lead this initiative. Oh, you're Black. Please be our chief diversity officer. That is as silly as someone coming to me saying like, oh, I have teeth, so I don't need a dentist. I'm going to handle this myself. Like, that's crazy, right? I have a point of view and be like, you know what? I think I'm going to brush my teeth like once a month. That sounds great. And a real dentist is like, you're on the right track, but actually you need to brush twice a day. You need to floss and you need to do all these things. And so what I encourage folks to do is that it doesn't matter what the person looks like or their identities, but we need to start treating DE&I as a business function the way that we do everything else. You would never have someone leading your engineering organization that didn't have years of experience being an engineer. You wouldn't have someone leading your sales information, sales org, unless they had experience sales. So for some reason, leaders, founders, CEOs understand and you value that expertise and you want people with that depth of knowledge to be there. But then when it comes to inclusion, we're like, oh, you're from an underrepresented group. Yes, this impacts you, but now you can do it. And that's where we then come in and we have to undo a lot of things. Again, people have the best intentions, but this is a space. And, and I tell folks and they're like, well, you don't learn about it in school. We're actually beyond that. Cornell has a fantastic HR program and they have multiple programs and classes that specialize in this. So we do have folks that have spent years in building their career that can put pen to paper on strategy, right? But unfortunately, we have a lot of leaders doing this work because they were actually leaders they were the head legal person, marketing, product, and then they had a seat at the table saying this is important, and then people said, oh, okay, well then you can do it.
Yep.
And now it's like someone who came to me and was like, Trier, you like marketing, and when a really good Carl's Jr. commercial comes on, I go run out and get a burger because it was a really good commercial. Okay, you got me sold. But then being like, oh, Trier, you should be our chief marketing officer. I know nothing about marketing. Let me tell you, so that's just silly. It's so silly.
And I think also, even I've had to go into organizations you talked about from an internal perspective, but had to kind of undo when consultants have come in who have deemed themselves to be DEI practitioners because they have experienced some sort of ism or injustice in the workplace. And it's, oh, I'm an expert at dismantling systems. And like you said, it takes more of that. It takes years of understanding data, doing assessments, knowing how decisions are made in the background and those types of things. So I think it's almost a two-pronged approach of why sometimes, as I said on one of my earlier episodes, DEI stands for dead end initiatives. Those were just that's one of the problems what you just talked about.
Natasha, I'm definitely going to add that to that. I love it, dead end initiatives, because that's what happens. Yes.
So, that's one of the reasons that I, outlined, is putting people in a position that, are not experts in it. Or you put someone in a position and you don't give them the autonomy that they need, a budget. Like, you should have a budget. I should be able to use it the way I want to use it and not have to wait for all these approvals and this. So I got to wait for this person to respond, or I don't even have a budget. It's all performative, right? And so that's why we've got to shift from that performative culture to that actionable culture. as what you did, and I know we got to wrap up, but as what you did in Just Work. And she said stuff earlier, and I guess we got to keep this YouTube friendly. I had to check when I posted on YouTube whether or not it's kid friendly. I don't know what that means. My kid hears me say the
Get
S
it
word all
done.
the time.
Get
So
it done.
I don't know what kid friendly is these days, but get done faster and fair so I can just work. Like, stop with all this other crap I've got to deal with in the workplace, and let me just work. Right? I don't want to walk in thinking about how I look, what my color is, what my gender is, what my race is, or my sexual orientation. I want to just work. So thank you, both of you. I love this conversation. I knew I would want to take it for 2 hours. Maybe you'll come back,
We'll do it again. Let's do it again.
Happy to.
Good. This is too good. Listen, where can my listeners contact you if they want to buy the book and buy the program?
Yeah, so go to our website, which is justworktogether.com. You can go get the book wherever you get books, your local bookstores, Amazon, everywhere, Audible. And then also, if you want to talk to us, there's a talk to us link on our website, or you can just email us at hello@justworktogether.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your questions, work with you, and just understand again how we can come and all work together. It's all of us together. And the last thing that, would love to leave your listeners with, Natasha, is that we really feel strongly about ending the default to silence, right? When you don't know what to do, we don't know what to say, we oftentimes default to silence. And what do you need to put into your toolkit? What do you need to add to your education so that we can end the default to silence? So say something, do something, so that we can create this just work environment.
I said in my TED Talk, when it comes to injustices, you do not have the right to remain silent. And so, like I said, I think all three of us have been writing and speaking the same thing. So I'm glad we're all together. Our ship, because you know what? I don't care who's transforming the workplace as long as they're doing it right. And so that everybody can just walk into the workplace and just work. Yes. All right, everyone. So listen, thank you so much for joining tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Like it, share it, comment, buy the book. Contact all of us. We really want to transform workplaces one at a time. But I do thank you for joining tonight. Don't forget, next week, same place, same time, 6:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Wednesday. Grab a drink, put your feet up, and let's talk about work. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Natasha.